The chamber floated like a crown in orbit above a pale blue gas giant, its translucent dome revealing the endless stars and the swirling storms beneath. Rows of curved benches radiated out from a central dais, filled with dozens of alien delegates in ceremonial uniforms, their voices blending into a low hum that vibrated through the air. Every corner of the Senate hall glowed with polished authority, the weight of centuries of governance carved into its walls. On this day, however, the assembly carried an air of finality, for the last item on their agenda was not merely political, it was historical. Humanity, once a proud and unruly species, was to be declared extinct. The presiding counselor, a towering insectoid with chitin that gleamed like polished steel, raised a spindly arm and struck the sound block. The hall quieted, every eye turning forward. It has been 400 cycles since any verifiable human presence was recorded, the counselor declared, its voice echoing with artificial amplification. Scouts have combed their colonies. Relics of war lie buried in drifting husks. Earth itself is silent and uninhabitable. With no successors, no offspring, no witnesses, humanity is no more. The words carried weight, yet many delegates seemed untroubled. For them, this was a formality, an overdue closing of a chapter long written. Some species had suffered greatly under human ambition, recalling wars over territory and resources. They watched the declaration with satisfaction, nodding as if a troublesome predator had finally been caged by time itself. Others, more somber, remembered human explorers who had shared knowledge, traded goods, and fought alongside them in distant conflicts. A quiet sorrow flickered in their eyes. The vote was swift. Across the chamber, lights blinked as each delegate signaled their decision. The results appeared in the air above the dais. Unanimous. A simple line scrolled in the Senate's ancient script, translated into countless tongues simultaneously. The species known as Homo sapiens is hereby declared extinct. All remaining assets, artifacts, and territories shall be claimed by the Interstellar Concord. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates bowed their heads in ritual mourning. Others spoke briskly of resource divisions and new patrol routes. The counselor struck the block again. So it is done. Humanity passes into memory. Yet before the decree could be archived, the chamber doors opened with a hiss that reverberated like thunder. Every voice fell silent. The guards turned, weapons half raised, as a lone figure stepped inside. She was tall, her presence cutting through the air like a blade. Her uniform was stark black trimmed with silver, the kind worn once by officers of the Terran fleet, though no such fleet had existed for centuries. Her hair was white as snow, framing a face pale yet unyielding, her eyes sharp as if carved from stormlight. She moved forward without hesitation, the echo of her boots filling the silence left by the stunned assembly. Gasps rose from the benches. Some delegates leaned forward in disbelief. Others recoiled as if they had seen a ghost. "Impossible," whispered a scaled ambassador, its voice trembling. "They are gone. They cannot." The woman reached the central platform, placing her hands firmly on the console that still glowed from the extinction decree. She surveyed the hall with steady poise, meeting the eyes of predator and pacifist alike, her calmness a defiance greater than any weapon. When she spoke, her voice carried with clarity that pierced the chamber's heavy air. "You are wrong." The words struck harder than any declaration the counselor had uttered. She let the silence linger, letting the weight of her existence settle upon them. Humanity is not extinct. I am here. I live. And I am not the last. Confusion erupted. Some shouted accusations of fabrication, demanding her removal. Others insisted on verification. A few sat frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. The presiding counselor struck the sound block repeatedly, struggling to restore order, but the chaos only deepened. The woman's gaze never faltered. She had entered knowing the danger, that her presence could be dismissed, erased, silenced forever by those who saw her as inconvenient. Yet she also knew the truth, that the story of humanity was not over, that the galaxy could not bury her people beneath silence and ash. Her arrival was more than survival, it was challenge. At last, the noise subsided into tense murmurs. The counselor's many eyes fixed upon her, antennae twitching in a mix of calculation and unease. "Identify yourself," it demanded. She straightened, her voice firm. "Commander Alara Vey, Terran Fleet. Last witness of Earth. And I will not allow you to write the end of my people without hearing the truth." The chamber seemed to contract around her words. Delegates shifted in their seats, alliances cracking beneath the weight of revelation. The extinction decree still glowed faintly above them, yet it now felt fragile, unfinished, challenged by the single, undeniable presence of the woman who stood before them. The silence that followed was not the peace of conclusion, but the tension before a storm. What had been settled with finality only moments before was now unsettled, thrown into question by the defiance of one survivor. The fate of humanity, once dismissed as dust, had re-entered the heart of the galaxy, demanding reckoning. And as the eyes of the Senate bore down upon her, Alara Vey knew she had only begun to fight. This is Section 1, under 1,000 words, 990. It introduces the Galactic Senate, the Extinction Decree, the atmosphere of alien politics, and the dramatic entrance of Commander Alara Vey, clearly setting up the central conflict. Do you want me to continue with Section 2 in the same narrative style? The chamber lights dimmed as the council signaled for restraint, forcing the cacophony of voices into uneasy silence. All eyes fixed on the woman at the central dais. Her very presence had ruptured the Senate's certainty, and yet the delegates hungered to know if she was real, if she could prove what she claimed. Alara Vey stood tall, the lines of her uniform catching the faint gleam of starlight through the dome above, as if the void itself had sent her to defy their verdict. "I was born on Luna," she began, her voice steady but edged with the weight of memory. "I served in the Terran fleet during the war against the Karen Dominion. I watched Earth burn." The words fell like stones into water, rippling across the assembly. Some aliens stiffened at the name of the Dominion, old adversaries who had since vanished into fractured territories. Others exchanged doubtful glances, wary of human melodrama. Yet no one interrupted. She spoke of the last days of her people, when human colonies went dark one by one, communications severed, outposts abandoned. Fleet after fleet was torn apart in ambushes, ships swallowed by silence. The skies over Earth turned black with the smoke of orbital bombardments, she said, her gaze far away. "We fought, but we were outnumbered, outmatched. Our governments crumbled, our alliances shattered. Humanity fractured, and one by one we fell." Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the console. "I commanded the Vigilant, a battlecruiser of the Third Fleet. In our final engagement, we were struck, crippled. I ordered evacuation, but I never made it. When I awoke, centuries had passed. Traders had found my ship drifting, its systems frozen. I was pulled from stasis, half dead, in a galaxy that had already forgotten my people." A murmur coursed through the Senate, heavy with doubt and intrigue. Some delegates leaned forward, compelled by the tragedy. Others recoiled, unwilling to sympathize. A reptilian envoy clicked its claws against the table. "One survivor does not negate extinction. You are an echo, not a people." Alara's eyes sharpened. "An echo can awaken memory. Memory can rebuild." Her voice rang with conviction. "You've declared my species extinct because it was convenient, because silence is easier to manage than uncertainty. But you are wrong. I am proof. Humanity endured longer than you believed, and if one remains, others may yet be found." The presiding counselor shifted uneasily, its antennae twitching. "Proof is required," it intoned. "Speak not in poetry, but in evidence." Without hesitation, Alara reached into her uniform and produced a small metallic crest, its surface scratched but intact. The insignia of the Terran fleet glinted beneath the chamber lights, unmistakable in design. Gasps spread among those who had seen its like on the battlefield long ago. She placed it on the console. "Forged from the alloys of Earth, carried through generations of officers. My DNA will match the records in your archives, if you dare to test it. And I carry knowledge no fabrication could invent. Coordinates of colonies you've long since abandoned to dust, names of worlds where our children once thrived. A chorus of whispers filled the hall, voices arguing in hushed tones. Some demanded immediate genetic testing. Others accused her of deception, a clone engineered to disrupt political order. A furred delegate with a voice like gravel barked, "Even if you are genuine, what does it change? One survivor cannot redeem the violence your species wrought. Humanity brought fire to every border it touched. Perhaps extinction was your justice." Alara met the accusation without flinching. Yes, humanity erred. We were reckless, ambitious, and often cruel. But we were also dreamers, builders, explorers who reached for the stars not because it was easy, but because we believed we could learn from them. For every war we waged, we forged alliances. For every weapon, we gave medicine. Do not pretend the galaxy is free of blood without us. The weight of her words lingered. Some delegates averted their eyes, reminded of wars they themselves had waged. Others sat rigid, unwilling to grant humanity the dignity of nuance. At last, the counselor's metallic voice broke the tension. Then let the Senate decide. A motion is raised to subject this claimant to investigation. Her testimony shall be tested, her origins verified. Until then, she remains under Senate custody. Protests flared immediately, some delegates demanding her release, others calling for her execution as an impostor. Guards in polished armor stepped forward, their presence a reminder that the chamber's authority was not merely ceremonial. Alara did not resist. She stood resolute, her chin lifted high, her eyes sweeping across the vast assembly. "You want truth?" she said, her voice clear above the rising arguments. "Then test me. Strip away your doubt. I am not afraid. But know this. Every second you spend questioning me is another second you allow the lie of our extinction to stand unchallenged. Humanity was not erased. Humanity was silenced. And I will not let that silence endure." The hall trembled with divided voices, the once unanimous decree shattered by her defiance. What had been settled beyond question only an hour before now lay in fragments, each delegate wrestling with the impossible reality standing before them. For the first time in centuries, the fate of humanity was no longer closed. As the guards escorted her from the dais, dozens of eyes followed, some cold, some curious, a few burning with hope. The extinction of her people was no longer fact, but a contested truth. And as the chamber descended into chaos, Alara Vey allowed herself the faintest flicker of a smile. She had cracked the Senate's certainty. Now, she would make them listen. The chamber reconvened under an air thick with tension, the kind that clung to skin and bone like static. Delegates returned to their stations, their eyes restless, their thoughts unsettled. The extinction decree still glowed faintly on the central display, but its authority now felt brittle, fragile in the presence of the human woman standing once more at the dais. Commander Alara Vey had been tested, her DNA scanned and confirmed against centuries-old archives. No deception remained. She was human, indisputably so. The question no longer rested on her existence, but on what it meant. The presiding counselor raised its arm, its metallic carapace gleaming under the dome's sterile light. "The evidence has been verified. The claimant is human. Thus, the Senate must decide whether this sole survivor constitutes the continuation of a people or merely a relic of their extinction. Let arguments be heard." A delegate draped in crimson robe stood, its translucent skin flickering with inner bioluminescence. One voice cannot speak for billions. Humanity is gone, scattered to ashes. To acknowledge her as their envoy risks chaos. Our laws demand that extinction is final, not to be overturned by accident. Another rose sharply, a feathered being with piercing gold eyes. And yet we cannot ignore the implications. If she survived, others may have as well. We declared a species erased without certainty. That arrogance now stands exposed. To dismiss her is to admit our justice is flawed. The chamber roiled with dissent. Some called for her execution as a threat to order. Others urged caution, fearing the precedent of erasing a people when a survivor still breathed. Alara waited until the voices dulled, then stepped forward. Her voice cut through the unrest with a clarity sharpened by resolve. "You see me as one," she began, her gaze sweeping across the tiers of alien faces, "but I carry the weight of many. Every memory of my people lives in me. Every triumph and failure, every war and discovery, every story told around firelight on Earth's soil, I carry it all. You say I am a relic, but relics remind you of what was true. You say I am alone, but I am not the last. There are others. You simply have not looked in the places where hope survives." Gasps and murmurs spread, but she pressed on, her words quickening like a rising storm. "I have seen records buried in derelict archives, transmissions intercepted and silenced. The Karen Dominion did not simply fight us, they orchestrated our erasure. They seeded destruction, ensured our colonies were left to rot, scattered misinformation so you would believe we were gone. They feared us. They knew that humanity's spirit, unbroken, could not be chained. And now, you repeat their lie by enshrining extinction." The accusation struck like a blade. Delegates shifted uneasily, some exchanging glances heavy with suspicion. A hulking reptilian slammed its fist on the console. "Lies. Convenient tales from a desperate survivor." But another delegate, one who had fought alongside humans centuries ago, rose slowly, their voice trembling with both memory and conviction. "I recall when humanity fought beside us against the Dominion. They bled as we bled. They burned as we burned. And though they were reckless, they did not yield. Perhaps it is true, the Dominion sought to erase them, for they feared what humanity could yet become." The presiding counselor's voice broke in, metallic and cold. "This Senate does not deliberate on sentiment. The question is survival. Can one woman, even if genuine, justify reversing extinction? Can humanity be restored through her alone?" Alara's hands gripped the console. For a heartbeat she hesitated, not from fear, but from the enormity of the burden pressing upon her. Then she lifted her chin. "I do not ask you to restore what is gone. I ask you to recognize what still endures. You think extinction is a decree you can write into permanence, but life does not end so easily. Humanity is more than a body count. It is will. It is defiance. And as long as I stand here, humanity breathes." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The delegates stared at her as though seeing not one, but countless shadows of those who had once filled the stars. The counselor called for a vote. Lights blinked across the chamber, each signal representing a decision, a weight that would tilt history one way or another. The tally wavered, nearly even. On one side, extinction reaffirmed, safe, absolute, unchallenged. On the other, survival recognized, precarious but undeniable. Then, at the last moment, a key delegate, a being whose voice often swayed the undecided, changed its vote. The chamber's great display shifted, the outcome final. Humanity was declared endangered, but not extinct. The words shimmered above them, fragile but blazing like a new dawn. A wave of voices rippled through the Senate, some outraged, others awed, many uncertain. But the decision was binding. The extinction decree had been overturned. The presiding counselor's gaze fixed on Alara. By majority decision, the species known as Homo sapiens is no longer extinct. You, Alara Vey, are hereby recognized as their ambassador, their custodian, and their witness. The weight of your kind rests on you. See that it does not falter." The chamber erupted with sound, arguments and celebrations colliding in a storm of voices. But Alara stood unmoved, her eyes fixed not on the squabbling delegates, but on the stars beyond the dome. Somewhere out there, perhaps in forgotten colonies or hidden refuges, remnants of her people might still linger. Her fight had only begun. She drew in a breath, steadying the storm inside her chest. They had declared humanity gone, buried, forgotten. Yet she had walked into their Senate, shattered their certainty, and reclaimed her people's place in the galaxy. The path ahead would be perilous, fraught with politics and peril, but she carried the unyielding truth. Humanity was not finished. And as the dome shimmered with the light of distant suns, Elara Vey whispered to herself the vow that would guide her every step. We will rise again.